a lot of people's relationships, when they use the word love, I love you, there's some connection, there's some energy, there's some emotional contract that takes place between two people. Relationships always seem to be a hot topic for many people in our community. And I always say that for me, in my own personal evolution, it's not necessary to work in a relationship. If we work in a relationship on some level, if it doesn't flow, it's not worth our personal effort. So let me explain that a little bit more. Most relationships, if you examine the different energy centers of the body, are pretty much connected to the first three energy centers. And I don't need to go into too much detail with them, but I will say the first energy center, of course, is our sexual identity. It's where we house our sexual energy. There's glands there that support that. The second energy center has quite a bit to do with the way we function in networks and communities and cultures. If we have food, we have shelter. It's protection, it's safety. And when it's in balance, of course, we can metabolize food and we can turn food into energy. And when the environment is unsafe or we're challenged by circumstances, we have to use our will and we have to be empowered to overcome them. And of course, energy makes it into the heart, and then we feel a greater expression of love, a greater expression of life, we feel more whole, and on it goes. To the fifth center, we have to express that. Our greatest understanding, we have to express our love in some way, or at least our evolution of love. It's an ongoing process. And if energy makes it into the brain, there are latent systems that become activated and we start seeing things more the way they really are. Some conditioning, some illusion, some veil is removed. And then, of course, it moves into the seventh center, and there's a cascade of harmony, our hormones, the chemical messengers that create more integration in all the energy centers of the body. And then if we're lucky enough, it makes it to the eighth energy center, and now we're beginning to release energy into our field. It's a natural evolution. It makes sense then if energy is stuck in the first center because of some past incident in our lives. If energy is stuck in the second center and we're feeling guilty or we're feeling shameful or we're suffering or unworthy, that's an imbalance in that center. And of course, if we're too controlling, if we're too egocentric, of course, energy is stuck in the third center. So a lot of people's relationships, when they use the word love, I love you, there's some connection, there's some energy, there's some emotional contract that takes place between two people. Now, if 95% of who we are by the time we're in our mid-30s is a set of programs and they're unconscious, then it makes sense then that two people can get together and one person could have someone betray them in a relationship and lie to them and steal from them. Another person could be ending a relationship, and that person, they could have had similar relationships, and because they had similar experiences, they share the same emotions, and if they share the same emotions, they share the same energy. So now there's some type of bond energetically. And they use each other on some level to reaffirm their conditioned emotional state. So they may not know it, but they love to hang out with each other because they get agreement from one another by sharing the same energy. They're sharing the same information. They're sharing the same emotions. They're sharing the same experiences. They're sharing the same memories. And so they can relate to one another, and that relationship then, for many people, is defined as love. But then we have to question if that's what it really is. And in the first 6 months of a relationship, when it's fresh and it's new and there's getting to know one another and there's intimacy and all those things, the relationship seems to feel like it's working out okay. But then when the chemicals of oxytocin and some of those other chemicals begin to wear off, and now we have the reality of life in front of us, and all of a sudden, a lot of times we wonder who that person is that we met 6 months ago, because now they're back in their unconscious program. So one of the things about relationships that's fundamentally important is relationships that truly are built in the sovereignty of a person's own individual wholeness and their own individual self-love. And that's an energy. And that energy that's created from somebody who works on opening their heart, that works on feeling more whole, that works on being in a state of gratitude, is someone who's worthy of having a relationship with someone else that has a similar energy. The challenge is that there's not a lot of people that want to open their heart. Why? Because they've been traumatized, they've been hurt, and so they protect their heart. It's complicated when you're looking for a relationship because what they really want to do is be happy. The fundamental feeling, the sponsoring thought behind it is that they want to have joy in their life. Well, that's okay. I mean, we all deserve that. But if I were to give Olga any advice, I would say then the first thing I would do is I'd write down all the things I wanted in a relationship, all the qualities of that other person. And then I would work on becoming that person. I would work on not looking for a relationship, but developing some really important qualities and characteristics of the very person that I would want to be in a relationship with. I think that's worthy. So now, as you no longer are looking, because looking implies separation, it implies lack, it implies, waiting for the person to show up to take away your pain or your unhappiness or whatever, we're going to fall short of our goal every single time. That's that kind of waiting for your outer world to finally Mr. Right to show up so then it could take away that unhappiness. But really, what we teach in this work is that when we get so happy with ourselves, and I don't care if it's healing from a disease, I don't care if it's finding the right person, I don't care if it's finally landing the right job, it doesn't matter. When people start getting to that point where they're no longer looking outside of them for joy, but they're finding their own company something that they enjoy, they're finding that they feel more whole. I was talking to someone that came to an event in Marco Island just recently, couldn't sleep, serious insomnia, very unhappy, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, all of those things. And she had 40-something slides on her mind movie, of course, the right relationship, the right job, all that stuff. By the end of the week, she was down to 4 slides in her mind movie because she felt so incredibly blessed, so happy with herself, so happy with life, so out of the polarity of anxiety and depression and incoherence that she didn't want any of those things anymore because she felt like she had them. Now, this is key because when you start feeling grateful for who you are, you don't want to be anybody else but yourself, or you feel so happy with your life, you could care less if you have the disease. These are the moments that are a moment where we're no longer identifying in lack any longer, or no longer identifying with our past, or no longer identifying with the disease, whatever you want to say. There's a freedom that takes place with it, and because we feel more whole, it's no longer creating from polarity or duality. So if Olga's spending the majority of her time looking for the right relationship and hasn't really taken care of her own personal programs, hasn't taken care of her unconscious thoughts, choices, habits, redundant experiences, familiar emotions, then she's the same personality that for the most part is going to create another personality that's similar to who she's been in previous relationships. Now, that doesn't mean that a person can't run into somebody and have a great relationship, even though they may not think they're ready. There's no linear process here. But people who finally start working on themselves and finally start feeling changed and transformed in some way, and they're no longer looking for someone, this is where it gets exciting. So, of course, we have to keep our hearts open, and at the same time, we have to learn from experiences in our past. And if Olga has had similar relationships with people and she's looking for the right person to be with, anytime something familiar shows up, that should be an indicator that that may not be the right person for her. And by the same means, if you're looking and you're going on a lot of dates to find the right person and haven't made your own personal changes, there are subconscious, implicit perceptions that cause us to make similar choices on a regular basis. What I mean is that many choices that people make, they're making those choices based on their past experiences or unconscious states of being that cause them to keep creating the same outcomes in their lives. So if we wanted to have something fresh and something new, then I would say it would be worth the wait if we had the willingness to say, okay, I want this kind of relationship and I'm going to work on becoming that person. I want a relationship where I'm in a state of joy and it flows and it's wonderful and it's easy. So that means I got to start flowing. That means I got to start getting happy. That means I got to start looking at myself. And if you get in that habit, when you finally walk into a relationship with someone who is your equal, you'll become less dependent on them bringing you joy or bringing you happiness. In fact, if you're not happy with yourself, you wouldn't want to be in the presence of that person until you were. So I always say in relationships, bring your best. That's my theory. And that's all I ever want from anybody is their best. So if you bring your best to a relationship and you know within a few moments that that person is not bringing their best, or they're not engaged, or they're not interested, or they have another agenda, or they're self-involved, whatever it is, then you make a different choice. You should know in a matter of seconds. Now, the cool thing is that people in this community who are practicing opening their hearts and practicing changing their emotional reactions and responses and practicing no longer being a victim and blaming anybody for the reason they are the way they are, but taking greater responsibilities for themselves and their lives, those are the people that spiral out of common. They spiral out of the predictable. And this is where they start having those moments where they start running into new people and start connecting in different relationships. And there may not be an intimate relationship in the beginning. It may just be meeting people that all of a sudden are like-minded.